So, Meta is back in the news again, joining another set of conglomerates for all the wrong reasons. So, McDonald's and Walmart decided that since the election, they didn't need to have DEI programs anymore. I have talked about DEI ad nauseum on this channel already, and this channel is just a month old. But apparently we need to talk about it again because Axios got their hands on a memo that was sent out, an employee memo that was sent out to Meta employees. And it basically said that they were going to end, effective immediately, their DEI programs, which I'm looking at my notes, so that's why I'm kind of looking off, but which basically means that, hiring, training, picking suppliers will now be, they won't consider people of color for those positions. Now, that's not to say that people of color won't get those positions, but it will go back to basically the unfair system that it was before DEI programs and inclusion programs were enacted. So, white people, white males, let's not pretend like white women do not benefit from DEI. They do. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Women are not on the same totem pole as men. Period. It doesn't matter if you are white, Asian, Indian, or black, or Latino. It does not matter. You're not at the same level as men. We don't get paid as much as men. So you, white women, are also a DEI by that definition. So, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But, so this is what happened. They said in the memo, and I quote, "The legal and policy landscape surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the United States is changing." That was the reason why Meta decided to scrap the program. What do you think is changing about the United States, the landscape of the United States? I'll wait. The United States is becoming more blatantly racist. It's becoming more blatantly bigoted. It's becoming more blatantly sexist. People aren't saying the quiet parts quiet anymore. There aren't any dog whistles anymore. They're just saying what they think. So you got people like Mark Zuckerberg ending fact checking. So now people can just lie like they did on Twitter. And he puts the onus on the people to say what's true or not. Most people on the community notes are not going to, believe someone of the community. We've already been doing that. When people lie, people look down in the comments. People say, this is not true. Will literally show their receipts and say this is why, and somebody else will be like, well, that's fake news. So community notes don't work. They didn't work on Twitter, and they won't work on Facebook. They won't work on Instagram. So what you're telling me is we need another Facebook version of Blue Sky, that everybody can just go there if they want actual sane conversations where people aren't allowed to call you out of your name. Another thing that they dismissed on there, they're allowing certain types of rhetoric now. Like you can call a trans person it. You can call women property. By the way, women, you are DEI because you are not included the same way that men are. Men are now allowed to call you, or people are now allowed to call you property on Facebook. And they don't get in trouble for that. Look at those community notes, guys. So that was the reason why they said they did it. It is effective immediately. So anybody that was in those programs are now going to be fired from those programs or moved to another place or something like that if they care enough to let these people keep their jobs. But this isn't actually new for Meta. Meta rolled back, and a lot of companies rolled back their DEI funding. They didn't roll back the programs completely, but they rolled back a lot of the funding for it back in 2023.
A new article featured on CNBC.com right now says that technology companies, including Alphabet, the parent company of Google, also Meta Platforms, have made big cuts to those DEI programs in 2023 so far. Can you take us through what exactly is the cut, why exactly the cuts are happening the way that they are right now, and just how big in scope could they be?
Right, Dom. So what we've found is that tech companies, including many of the FANG companies that we know, made large commitments to underrepresented talent and third-party organizations in 2020 amid the George Floyd murder. What we found this year is that a lot of them have downsized some of their commitments. They have cut DEI orgs, which means things like, people who are in charge of recruiting and retaining underrepresented talent, cutting people in those positions, and then as well as backing down from some of their sponsorship and participation in some larger tech conferences that help increase this representation in the tech industry. And the reason they're giving is it's a measure of cost cutting and that they don't know when they'll get their budget back, but some have told us that they've cut their budget by as much as 90%. That was designated for DEI initiatives and for increasing representation in the tech industry, which is important because that ultimately determines how products will be made at these companies and what kinds of users will be taken into account.
This all comes at a time, though, when we keep hearing about many of these tech companies and some of their enterprise business customers increasing their spending on things like artificial intelligence.
Right. Well, that's part of the reasons that these companies and executives are actually giving. Some of these organizations, they're saying that DEI doesn't necessarily contribute to the bottom line, and yet they're going and investing a lot into AI, which a lot of investors and shareholders are expecting. If it's slowing down on, increasing representation and retaining the people that are so important to making these products, for all different people of all different backgrounds, they're also speeding up at the same time, doubling, tripling down on this technology, artificial intelligence, which we saw hit breakneck speed this year. So those two, increase in AI, decrease in DEI, history tells us that products, we've seen Google and Meta, for example, struggle with its some of its image recognition technology in identifying Black people, for example. So, it's very discouraging for a lot of these organizations.
90% of the company's budget for DEI was dropped. And they are now putting a lot of their time, effort, and money into AI. Now, a lot of people say they voted for Trump because they're worried about their jobs, even though the numbers did not bear that out. He lost more jobs in his administration than, hardly anybody. I mean, it had a little bit to do with COVID, but them jobs were leaving anyway. Manufacturing jobs were already having a problem during the end of his tenure. AI is really going to be what takes your jobs. And Trump has absolutely no problem with that happening. He is on the side of the tech bros. He is on the side of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy is that Shamir Krishnan. He's on the side of them. You know, he will be doing those H-1B visas to replace you. They don't want to train you. They want people that are already tech savvy, you know, from India to come in with those H-1B visas. They don't want to heighten your education and train you. They think you're stupid. So now they're doing away with all of these policies that were put in place to protect people from discrimination. And I say once again, it's not just black people. That's why a lot of people right now are celebrating, is because they think that it's just black people. And as terrible as that is already, that you're like, oh, it's just black people. I'm not black, so don't worry about it. You know, I'm not black, and I thought that, you know, black people shouldn't be getting better treatment anyway. Black people weren't getting better treatment. With DEI programs, we were barely getting equal treatment. Barely. I can name 2 times, 3 actually, that my husband got passed over for jobs that he was more than qualified for. Meanwhile, another person, white male, was put into that position. 2 of those times, that person didn't even last 6 months. And they still hired someone over my husband who had been there and been working and was respected by his co-workers. But the higher ups wouldn't put him in a leadership position. But they put a white guy with not as much respect from the co-workers, a guy outside of the company that nobody knew, or a guy who had known mental issues and nobody in the company actually respected him. They got put over my husband just because my husband was black. So we're not going to sit here and say that DEI made anything better, made us more privileged than white people. It barely made us equal. But the thing is, DEI programs really, really benefited white women. They are the highest benefiters of DEI. And it really benefited people with disabilities. And there are acts for the people with disabilities too. But DEI is the one who hires them. They put them into the system. Now they can just say, person with disabilities, I'm sorry, you don't have enough qualifications. I'm sorry, you're overqualified. Overqualified is something that black people hear a lot. So if you guys have never heard you are overqualified for a position, that's privilege right there. Because that's something that black people hear all the time. DEI also helps Asians, which is especially the ones at Harvard that tried to get rid of their DEI programs because they thought that it was helping black people and that was getting in the way of the Asian people coming in. So they wanted to snub black people by getting rid of DEI, not understanding that they were the benefiters of DEI. So they decided to get rid of it. They got rid of it at Harvard. And now they're suing Harvard because the numbers of Asians that the Harvard has let into the school has dropped substantially. DEI is not just for black people. So if you are celebrating and you are not a white Christian straight male, because LGBT community people, all of you, you are DEI. You are DEI. So if you're celebrating and you're not a white Christian male, you should probably rethink your celebration activities. Don't pop that cork too soon.